Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, into the one and only Straight Facts, homie. Three's a charm. It's now a routine at this point. It's a pattern. I'm Mason Souza. There's Walter Sabina and John Lyons, as always, with our member, our guest, our very special guest. His name is Bob Socci. You know that. He is going into his 11th season, completed a decade of work as the play-by-play announcer of your New England Patriots. Bob, it is a pleasure to see you. Obviously, Walter and John, it's good to see you guys as well.
Likewise, feeling is mutual. It's great to keep meeting like this.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's do it more often, shall we?
It's a tradition unlike any other.
Hello, friends.
Yeah.
We are friends. We are homies, if you will, on Straight Facts Homie here. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. YouTube, where this show will be found later as well. Can join the conversation on one of those sites. Absolutely. Yeah, as I mentioned, I guess I'll start, and Walter, we can go to you and go around the house. This is a conversation. This is a party here. We'll talk about the New England Patriots. We'll talk about the offseason that is and is still going on as it creeps on us every year. Training camp is days away at this point. About what I mentioned, is it okay to kind of reflect, Bob? Have you ever sat back and be like, wow, 10 years with the most successful franchise of this century? How has the ride been for you? I just kind of want to hear from a personal aspect going into your 11th year.
Well, it doesn't seem like 10 years, so I guess that suggests the ride has been terrific, which it has. I think back on a decade, and I try not to reflect on individual moments, but just take it in and appreciate all of it. And it's been the experience of a lifetime. Realizing a dream that I had as a young kid to broadcast in the NFL or in the major leagues in any sport, but to reach this level. And in a lot of ways, it's been more than I possibly could have imagined it being. And I say that in regards to the people that I've gotten a chance to meet and know. I was talking with some young broadcasters yesterday, and I likened the experience that I had on the journey here in minor league baseball towns and working in college athletics in the small communities, very small fan bases in some cases, but the tight-knit communities that are there every day in support of the team. And the thought was along the way, well, if I ever got to the NFL, that's not going to exist in a stadium where there are 68, 69,000 people, and you have hundreds of thousands of listeners to your broadcasts every week for a team like the New England Patriots. And yet that very much is the case, that it is a small community in a lot of ways, being a large fan base. I know it sounds unusual, but the people that you interact with on a regular basis, like yourselves, the fans that you get to know a little bit better than many, some of the season ticket holders that were there to welcome me from the start, people around the stadium, people on the team, with the team. So it's been a tremendous experience from a professional standpoint, but I think especially so from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, and obviously, you've had the decade, and even going back before you, all the other Patriots announcers, but we're still young. Mason, John, and myself are still young, so we're looking forward to having you for years to come, and lots of other great memories. I want to bring it right back to the field, and bring it right to the quarterback, Mac Jones, the whole offensive side of the ball. Questions across the board with this offense and the signing of Bill O'Brien. I've heard some people say, and I've kind of got sucked in, that this is kind of a make or break year for Mac Jones, or there's no more excuses or very little excuses for Mac Jones. I mean, you'll go back to his rookie year. It was okay. He was a rookie, kind of thrown in. Cam Newton was cut, later in training camp, or actually right after preseason, and Mac Jones was kind of just thrown to the wolves his rookie year. So everyone kind of sat back on that. Last year was the whole Matt Patricia, Joe Judge ordeal. His stats fell, and we were wondering what Mac Jones could possibly be. There was a possible rift with him and Belichick. And now this offseason, kind of Mac Jones got what he wanted. He got his offensive coordinator, who's been an established offensive coordinator in this league. And he's got some weapons around him, maybe not they're not sexy weapons, but I think they're weapons that can get the job done for Mac Jones. So do you kind of buy into the fact that this could be a make or break year, or, you know, a no excuse year for Mac Jones? He's kind of got everything at his disposal, and if not, what are your expectations for Mac Jones this upcoming season?
Walter, I tried not to live in black and white terms when it comes to this stuff, and I don't say that to be flippant. But for example, you know, and I do believe, by the way, this is an important year for Mac. It's kind of a crossroads year for him. I think we don't know who he is yet as an NFL quarterback, what his ceiling may very well be. I think there was a lot of promise his first year. I think last season there were plenty of reasons to lose sight of so many positives from 2021. I think last year certainly was a setback for him and for the team offensively. Not all of it. In fact, I think most of it, not his doing. But nonetheless, there were things that he certainly could have handled better. And there were times when he did not play well on his own volition, whether it was the play design, play calling, or simply, you know, the lack of his performance. Having said that, I think there still are, well, I do think that the presence of Bill O'Brien will lend great improvement to this team, and it will be a functional offense and conceptually sound. And Mac Jones will again have the offense go through him as the quarterback, being able at the line to make adjustments to what he sees defensively with the checks. And he should have a better group around him than last year, I think, because of Bill O'Brien, better utilizing, if they're both healthy on the field, Hunter Henry alongside Mike Gesicki, better utilizing some of the other personnel for this team. Having said that, I mean, they still have substantial questions. What happens if Trent Brown, doesn't revert back to, the form of 2018, as we've been hoping for several years, or even 2021? What happens if Connor McDermott, nor Calvin Anderson, nor Riley Reif are able to occupy right tackle well enough to protect the quarterback? What happens if Juju Smith-Schuster isn't out on the field at the start of training camp, or at least isn't his most productive self, coming off of a postseason knee injury and having not participated in spring drills actively on the field in OTAs? What happens if Mike Gesicki or Hunter Henry go down? What happens if Gesicki doesn't adjust? He's a big receiver, really more than a second tight end. I think they're still very thin at that position. What about Ty Montgomery, Pierre Strong as the potential third down back for this team? If neither one is able really to fill that role, which I think was a glaring absence last year, to take some of the reps off of the shoulders of Ramondre Stevenson, I think kind of wore down by the end of the season. So yeah, I think it's an important year for Mac Jones, but we still can't lose sight of the questions that are in that offensive group and around him at the quarterback position. I think if he improves, if the team progresses, which I expect them to, I don't think that you give up on the quarterback necessarily. A lot of it's going to depend on just, the circumstances of how he plays, how he handles things, but a lot of things that'll be out of his control.
Bob, I thought you brought up a couple interesting points. One, that last year was really a setback for not just Mac Jones, but the offense as a whole. And although on the surface, there's a lot of things I think to be excited about, especially with Bill O'Brien, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Gesicki, there are some real questions. Trent Brown, how are these new weapons going to mesh with Jones, with O'Brien? When you go back to 2021, the Patriots were 7th in the league in points per game with a rookie Mac Jones. How close to that do you think they can? Do you think they can get all the way back there with Bill O'Brien and with just some new weapons? Or do you think this is going to be, if they jump up to 12th, you'll be happy? What do you think is the ceiling, per se, of this offense?
John, I do think that they can get back to where they were, close to it, in 2021. Now, I think they're going to probably play a little bit differently because right now, as I mentioned, they have Ramondre Stevenson, and then I think in the backfield some hopefuls, but by no means guys that you would expect to have an extensive number of reps right now. I think the hope is that Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris potentially could get a lot more carries. That Ty Montgomery will be healthy, and he's going to move around a lot too if he's out there, not just in the backfield. Whereas, in 2021, you had a rookie Stevenson who really emerged after an early mishap in the season opener. And then you had Damian Harris, of course, who had a very productive season for the Patriots. And he had an offensive line too that I think, overall it was pretty solid after, let's say, week 4. They had a lot of issues the first few weeks. I think back to the New Orleans game, and then they were able to solidify things moving forward during the course of the year. They ran the ball up. They played more of a slower tempo type of game. I think this year they're going to try to do some things, at least based on what we saw the way they practiced. I think they're going to try to do some things to vary the tempo, which they haven't done in quite some time, really. And I think that, because of Mac's experience in 2021, now he's in O'Brien's offense, which won't be the same as Josh McDaniels necessarily. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, things are going to funnel through the quarterback. And I think where he will be at the start of this year with O'Brien's offense is where we would have expected him to be at the start of last year. I think you may recall, despite everything that was reported about Belichick and Mac Jones during the course of the season, and even this offseason, the record still reflects Bill's thoughts this time last year. He's very complimentary of Mac going into training camp and talked about how he was going to start at a much higher level than the year before. And so I kind of think that we're in a way erasing 2022 in a sense, because he's picking up where he left off in 2021. That's the way I look at it.
He is Bob Socci. You're watching and listening to Straight Facts, Homie, TV show / podcast right here, talking about the Patriots off season. Pleasure to have Bob on with us again. 3rd season in a row. Really appreciate it. Let's continue on with the offense. I prefer the offense talk myself. You mentioned some names there early on, Mike Gesicki, Juju Smith-Schuster, if he can get on the field. I remember there was a quote early on in the spring, something to the effect of, you should get a college degree for learning this offense. So that kind of gives me some maybe Ocho Cinco vibes, like didn't really get the offense. That's just me, my pessimistic mind. That's where I go there, but hopefully he can be a factor on the field. Those names, my main question, my first one is like the depth of this team. Then again, all 32 teams in July usually have depth before they play a single game. But the Patriots are known for, obviously, we've heard this one before. Stop me if you've heard this. The next man up. And do your job and all that stuff. There are multiple guys at each position that could be the lead guy for that unit. Does that translate to wins, though? And my question to you, and I'll kind of throw a take in there, I think they're missing that elite piece. And I've been burned once on this show. I'll do it again, talking about things that are current, and then a signing happens, and then this question is irrelevant. But DeAndre Hopkins is still out there. Watch, he will sign in the next 5 minutes. But do you think someone like that correlates to wins? Obviously, he correlates to. I don't say obviously. There could be an argument that he doesn't, that things get muddied up, but I would think it correlates to a more successful offense. Does it correlate to wins? Do they need an elite player, especially at that position, to help someone like Mac Jones?
Well, I think it relates to John's question, Mason. Rather than looking at where they are points per game, I think it's about how competitive can the offense allow them to be against that schedule. Because I think the defense still, with some questions emerging, particularly in the secondary, given the uncertainty that right now surrounds Jack Jones in his future in football and otherwise. To me, the big question for the offense will be, are they going to score enough points to keep the Patriots in striking distance, to stay with the teams they're going to play, as well as one would expect the defense to perform, just because of the strength of the schedule and the improvement within the division? Buffalo is what Buffalo's been, I think, offensively. Miami has improved in my mind in the offseason. And certainly I think the Jets with Aaron Rodgers are an improved football team. They had a completely woeful quarterback play against the Patriots in those 2 games last year, enabling the Patriots really to prevail and sweep the series again. So I think for the Pats, the big thing is, can the offense score enough to be competitive against the schedule and give them an opportunity to get into the playoffs by the end of the year? Certainly, I think a player like DeAndre Hopkins would help them toward that end. I think that, like, when you start talking about elite pieces, in a lot of ways, I think those are the guys that get you over the hump. I have a lot of concerns about the depth as we've touched on, but I do think DeAndre Hopkins could help them in a big way at the receiver position. There's still across the board, I think a need for speed. Apologies for the bad, the bad rhyme from Top Gun. Tyquan Thornton has that. But again, there are questions regarding him and the slight build and the inconsistencies we would have expected in his rookie season, but also, again, the fact that we didn't really see him very much in the spring. Can he take a big jump from year one to year two? Can Kendrick Bourne go back to 2021 for him? He certainly seemed to have a renewed energy in the spring. And I think, he probably stands among the guys that, have been productive in the past for this team to return to their prior form and get past, admittedly, by his own admission, a season last year when, he really didn't put forth, his best. So I think that, there are guys that are going to improve like him, but I would see a Hopkins type being someone who can help them a lot to again stay competitive against that schedule and give themselves a chance to get into the playoffs.
Let's be honest, Bob, real quick. I'm sorry, Walter, but no, it was, you can say Bourne was in the doghouse. It was a bad situation with the coaches. That's the situation there, unless you think otherwise.
It was, but I will say this though too. I think that there were reasons at times for him to be in the doghouse. Some of the mistakes that he made, the mental errors that he made, the lack of preparedness a couple of times during practices, and then during the season being lined up, improperly, not getting lined up and being offsides, and more than one occasion. Those are kind of inexcusable errors, especially for a veteran. So I think that's where, and like I said, by his own admission, last year was a tough year for him. And I don't think that, he wasn't complicit in it. I certainly think you're right. He fell into disfavor very quickly. He never could get out of that proverbial doghouse.
Yeah, and talking about Kendrick Bourne, we were talking about Hopkins and Smith-Schuster. That's the one guy I think if he can get back to form of 2021, I think it'll help this offense immensely. And, just the couple of targets or a couple of plays that he got last year, Mac Jones, he built that repertoire towards the end of 2021. And in the playing time he got, Mac Jones would throw in the ball and he'd have like 2 catches, but for, 40 yards or something like that. So when he was seeing the playing time, he was seeing passes coming his way. So I think if that's one guy that can get back on track this year, it'll be a big target for Mac Jones. But me flipping to the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be a simple question, and I just kind of want your thoughts on it, Bob. Devin McCourty and the retirement of such a leader, not only on the defensive side of the ball, but the team in general. And, just looking in that secondary, you've got Jonathan Jones, rookie Christian Gonzalez, Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, Jalen Mills, who we may see there at safety. You've got Jabril Peppers. So, but just overall, losing Devin McCourty, how much does that hurt in terms of leadership? What he brought production wise? Is the defense maybe going to take a step back? Now, I know it's just one of 11 players, but when you look at a guy like Devin McCourty and what he brought for so many years, I don't think you can look past that and what you're losing. Not, like I said, not only in production, but leadership as well. And then if it's kind of a 2-part question, is there someone else on the defense that you think can kind of step up and take that leadership role, this season that McCourty had, whether it be Judon or someone else in your opinion? I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, I think in terms of the leadership of the defense, I really think it's going to stem from Juwan Bentley and Dietrich Wise, who've kind of emerged the last year or so as the heir apparents to McCourty on the defensive side of the ball, and Lawrence Guy, he's been a captain for this team in the past. I think in the case though of Devin McCourty's quarterbacking abilities, let's say, that I think is going to be the real challenge to try to overcome his absence now. We look at the defense and a lot of interchangeable parts, all these safeties. People have talked about the positionless defense. I think that's been a term I've heard a few times in the spring and summer, and varying coverages and trying to confuse the opposition. Well, the one guy more than any other who policed those things and made sure that guys were on the same page, that the communication was as it should be, as it needed to be pre-snap, that if there was a tell immediately before the snap, he could communicate that, relay that to the other guys back there. It's the last line of defense. It was Devin McCourty. And I think that, his value to the team during the course of his career couldn't be fully measured because there were so many plays, in all probability, that he prevented, not just plays made, the plays that he prevented the other team from making. It's kind of like a great fielder in baseball. Guy gets good jumps on fly balls. He doesn't necessarily have to make spectacular catches to give you run reduction, to use an analytics term that I've heard.
It's a good one, Bob. Run reduction. There you go.
Run reduction. We often talk about run production in baseball. Well, run reduction defensively. And it's not just the spectacular plays, but it's, again, the Jackie Bradley types make great catches. But the thing about him that always impressed me was what kind of jumps he got to make plays look relatively routine that should have been. And I think Devin McCourty did a lot of things back there at safety for the Patriots that we never knew about. Just because when they were changing coverages and there might have been confusion, he was able to make sure that everybody got lined up properly and everybody knew what their assignment was far more times than not.
Yeah, and Bob, I think just to follow that, I think the biggest testament to Devin McCourty is how many times in his career did the Patriots get beat for huge plays with him on the field? I mean, extremely rarely. And I think that in itself is a great testament, because you talked about, I mean, there's a lot of things that you don't see, just him getting guys in the right place and his own great talent and athleticism. I mean, they very rarely gave up big plays. And I think that is extremely valuable. But Bob, look, we got to talk about the special teams here, because this is something that, and I know, when Mason was sitting down to do this, special teams was the first thing on his mind, but
you got it.
Just kidding, Mason. But
look, right here.
One of the hallmarks of a 20-year dynasty for them was great special teams play year in and year out. And over the last 2 years, they've taken a real step backwards. They've had 4 punts blocked in the last 2 years, 0-4 in those games, by the way. In the last 2 months of last year, they gave up 3 kickoff returns for touchdowns. They gave up 6 total in the previous 21 seasons. So, this is something that they've taken a big step back in special teams. And one encouraging thing to me from the offseason is their investment there. We've heard Joe Judge has moved over to take a larger coaching role in special teams, where he was very successful prior to leaving for the Giants. And we've seen them invest not just draft capital, but free agent capital in special teams. And I know, again, special teams is not the most exciting thing for people to talk about, but I think we've seen it in the last 2 years. They've lost games because of it. Just in the reverse, they won games in previous years because of it. When you look at their special teams and the upgrades they made, are you confident that they are going to make a big step forward in special teams and get back to what they were at their height? Or do you think they still have some more work to do there, still questions there? Because I, for one, am really interested to see how their special teams performs this year.
Well, John, you and I are kindred spirits, because I love special teams. I'm one of the few.
We both thought we got to, hold strong.
And I do think, look, as you alluded to, not only did they launch a dynasty off the right foot of the place kicker, Vinatieri in the snow, and then, of course, to win the Super Bowl against the Rams, and then again against the Panthers, but they won the AFC Championship to get into that first Super Bowl title game against the Rams under Belichick, because they returned a punt for a touchdown and they blocked a field goal, which led to another score in Pittsburgh. And I was just reading something today where Phil Simms on the broadcast for CBS, and one of the keys going into that game is the Patriots felt they had a decided advantage on special teams. Brady gets hurt, Bledsoe takes over, does well enough, but really special teams plays resulted in that win. And that's been the track record for the better part of 2 decades, where they have had that decided advantage over their opposition in special teams. I've talked to coaches from other organizations, people like Dave Phipp of the Philadelphia Eagles in the past, more recently the Detroit Lions, very good special teams coach. Can't say enough good words about the Patriots, the way they've done things. Guys who've been here have gone on, become good special teams coaches. Bubba Ventrone, Larry Izzo, and that's part of the Patriots fabric as an organization the last 2 decades because of Belichick. And I think you're right. I mean, they've made a heavy investment. Now, they've made a pretty significant investment in the last couple of years, too, and they didn't get a return on it. But I think they are going to be a lot better because of Joe Judge going back there. He definitely was heavily involved during the spring and in the OTAs and mini camp. And based on what everybody's saying, from Cam Accord, who's been the coordinator, to Matthew Slater, to other players on that team, Joe Judge, whether he has the title or not, is very much helping to coordinate that team, if not being the main guy in charge of that unit. The big question for me will be, at place kicker and punter, obviously, because you have two rookies that were drafted. Ryland is going to come in from Maryland, he's got a very impressive leg. You could see that in the spring. He's got a great track record coming off his last year in college. Nick Folk has been able to stave off young kickers in the past. I would imagine it's going to be the kind of decision that gets delayed until relatively late in the preseason, if not all the way to the end of the preseason, just to make sure that Ryland mentally has what it takes to succeed in the NFL. But it's a huge question. If there's a miss, if there's a bad game, how are you going to bounce back from it? And guys like Gostkowski, Vinatieri before him, they were able to do that. Folk has been able to do that. Young kickers is always a big question. That's why I think a lot of young kickers don't stick immediately in the NFL. They wind up bouncing around to a few different places. And then the punter position as well. They drafted Behringer, but the kid that they brought in, Waitman, has a very good leg too. And that's going to be an interesting competition. And we saw last year, it was a big factor for them. Jake Bailey had a down year. The previous season, inconsistent. Last year, injured at the end, suspended in the end, a down year again, and it affected them not only in punt and field position, but also on kickoffs. And again, because they're not going to have an explosive offense, they no longer have Tom Brady at quarterback. Every extra first down counts, whether you're giving up 10 yards of field position to the other team that you have to defend, or I think more appropriately with the Patriots, whether you're not getting those extra 10 yards in the trade-off of field position, to allow your offense not to have to drive, those extra 10 yards, pick up another first down, one more third down conversion.
They may be of competing stations, but the Montagues and Capulets over here, Bob and John, love their special teams.
Special teams unites us.
Special teams, common bond. Yes. It's a beautiful thing. Just a few minutes here with Bob Socci, play-by-play of the New England Patriots. Gracious to have spend his time with us for a half hour here on Straight Facts Homie. Final question for me, if Walter and John, you want to throw something quick as well. Final remarks, go ahead. The rookies coming in. You mentioned suspended player at the end of last year, a player that could be dealing with suspension on the cornerback position, Jack Jones. His situation's up in the air. That all of a sudden makes rookie Christian Gonzalez's job much more crucial in his rookie year. We saw some Instagram footage that he looked very quick off his first step, a change of direction, talking about Devin McCourty in his prime and all that. Gonzalez looks like he definitely has that. What are our expectations for him? And is there any other rookie that you have your eye on to make an impact in their first year?
Well, Mason, I'll take the cop out because my expectations for him are that a lot will be expected of him.
Okay.
As a rookie, because of where he was drafted and the size that he brings to the position, some of the expectations, some of the ways he's been described. But when you're watching spring football in shorts, it's nothing like real football. That really doesn't even begin. They say it begins after they put the pads on, but it really doesn't begin until September 10th when they play the Philadelphia Eagles, and we'll see how he holds up, if he can stay on the field first and foremost, and then how he holds up, because he's going to have his moments as a rookie where he'll be exposed. But he is a young man that has a huge upside. The fluidity for his size is very impressive, as you alluded to. The change of direction, his athletic ability. I think he's a guy that is going to have an important role for this team to fill. But I can't say that I expect him to do it. I hope he does. I think, that's the big thing. It's more hope than expectation at this point, even if he was a first round draft pick for me. And with regards to the other rookies, I think on the surface, it's a class that has a lot of intrigue. I certainly think Keon White is a guy that's probably going to see a fair amount of time. I would hope that if he doesn't have the kind of rookie season that Barmore had, where I think he flashed, more consistently than not, then I think that I think that'll be surprising to me. I think Keon White is a young man who stands to get a lot of opportunities for this team defensively because of his versatility, his reputation being a really smart guy. What we saw in the spring, again, no blocking, no contact, no pads, but just where they were positioning him with the different defensive groups. And I think because of Judon and Uche and some of the other people that are out there, he's going to get some opportunities to make some plays.
And just one quick one for me, Bob Socci heading into the 2023 season, one offensive player, one defensive player that you're keeping your eye on.
That's a great one, Walter. I think offensively, he's hard to miss. Trent Brown. I think he's the most important piece right now for this team offensively. If he doesn't deliver and he's not out there playing a competent left tackle for the Patriots regularly, then that means one of those other guys is going to have to really stunningly succeed. Talking about those other tackles in that group right now. Because I think that's extremely important for this team to give the offense any chance, to give the quarterback a chance. And from the defensive side of the ball, I think the situation at safety, we've talked about it a bit. This is a guy who's, I think, been in the spotlight the last few years. He was once their top pick. Talking about Kyle Duggar, there's a lot to like about him. Obviously, there's potentially a lot on his shoulders this year if he's to be considered the leader of that back end group from the safety position and to take over some of, if not most of, Devin McCourty's duties in the past. It's obviously a potential year of transition for him as well, the stage of his career. Is he a guy that is going to be committed to as a future part of this organization? So I don't think he's a guy that we've been watching the last few years anyway. But he's one to me that stands out as a really important piece defensively for them. And Uche's another too. I think Uche built on the success that he had last year, and this is a pivotal year for him for obvious reasons, because there could be a huge payday at the end of it, whether it's in New England or elsewhere.
Contract year, huge for every player, especially someone like Josh Uche, who was on fire for he had 7 sacks in 5 games or something crazy like that. We'll see if he can keep up that consistency. Kyle Duggar's a great one too. I think this might be a Pro Bowl year for Kyle Duggar with 3 return touchdowns last year. His name is definitely out there, and he could be one of the top 5 safeties in the league in due time. So yeah, he could be that heart and soul of the defense, along with guys like Dietrich Wise, Juwan Bentley, etc. He is Bob Socci, play-by-play voice of the New England Patriots. Find him on Twitter, Bob Socci, SOCCI. It is a pleasure. Once again, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mason, John, Walter. And Mason, you alluded to our rival employers, but congratulations to John.
Thank you, Bob.
I can't say that I'm going to look forward to listening to you, if you know what I mean. But
yeah, well, we'll link up once a year on this.
Somebody else is listening nearby.
Yeah. We'll link up once a year on Straight Facts Homie, at least.
All right, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on Straight Facts Homie. We'll talk to you next time.